My growing up years were spent moving a good bit because my father was in the Marine Corps, and I was born in California in Bellflower, and we subsequently moved to Florida. And these were all, well, and then we moved back to California. We spent some time in North Carolina and Maryland, and probably my favorite place, which was Hawaii. We lived there for a couple of years when I was in grade school. Then we went back to South Carolina, and then finally to Virginia, where I was in high school and college. And those were, it was an exciting thing, I think, for a child. I had this grand vision when we found out we were going to live in Hawaii, that I was going to get to live in a grass hut on the beach. I was a little disappointed that we had to live in a regular house. But, you know, we get over these minor disappointments when we're young very quickly. I went to high school and college in Virginia, and one of the things that happened was that I met Andy when I was a junior in college, and 3 weeks after I met him, he was shipped off to Vietnam, sort of overnight, and we had established a very quick relationship, and so I had all of his things to take care of and then when he came home on leave, we were engaged, and after I graduated from college, we were married. So it was a very whirlwind romance is how I would describe it, and that sort of set the tone for what happened next. So, which was a whirlwind first child. And we moved to Germany, we moved back to the States, and Andy decided to go to law school. So we continued having the fun of, we found that we really enjoyed children, and we loved the idea of family. And so we kept moving and kept having children until we decided that it was time for community. Even though we'd spent a lot of time traveling, we really thought that it would be wonderful to raise children in a place that they wanted to return to, or just know that they could see people that they'd grown up with. And so we picked, we were in Olympia at the time, and Andy got a job in Seattle, and we decided to look at Bainbridge Island because it seemed like a wonderful thing to be able to take a ferry ride to work. That would be a great, and of course when we came to Bainbridge, we just fell in love with it. It was 1977, and it was, you know, it's still Bainbridge, but it was much less. Everything closed down well, the grocery stores I think closed at 5, everything closed 5, I think at that point. There was one movie theater, which was Linwood, and they only showed movies on Thursday and Friday and Saturday nights, and it was just one showing. So it was a great time to be here. We didn't have a lot of money at the time, and so we spent a lot of time just being resourceful. And Bainbridge was a great place because the whole sense that you could go out and pick blackberries, and at that time, even at Fort Ward, there were all these wonderful apple trees that you could go harvest. So we spent a lot of time doing things like that, a lot of family building time. And in terms of the community, for me, it was essentially school activities and making sure the children were clothed and fed. Bainbridge has always felt like a safe place with children. And I think that's in large part why our children have come back. I mean, out of our 5 children, 4 in raising their families have chosen to move back to Bainbridge. And I think that's in large part because of that it's not the Bainbridge where you can, you know, race your car in Mantis-Olson and try and go through that giant mud puddle or climb the towers at Fort Ward for your rite of passage. I mean, that Bainbridge is gone, but there's still a sense of safety and community and a friendliness to just living here. And an opportunity, I think, to get to know people for a longer period of time. The first organization I dipped my toe into was just Friends of the Library. And of course, that was simply because I love what libraries are. It was something I thought about doing at one time and didn't. And that was, that was a great experience because that's terrific organization. I got involved in some way because Andy had begun to be involved in Blakely Harbor Park. And so that was working on the committee to sort of do fundraising and other things with Blakely Harbor Park. And I found that I really, really enjoyed that. I just loved thinking things through, being creative, bringing people together around a project and watching how it could be successful when you brought in people or you worked with people. Plus you get to meet so many wonderful people because the people involved in these things care so deeply about what's going on. So with Blakely Harbor, I was asked to be on the board of the Land Trust after my work on Blakely Harbor. And then I found that I was learning how to do work on a board, which was, I'd been on Friends of the Library, but that was a very different kind of thing. But I also think for me, the whole idea of saving land for people and for animals and just for the environment. I mean, it just has always resonated with me since I started squashing cans in 1970 to recycle. I mean, those things have just made perfect sense to me. So one of the things that happened on the Land Trust was that we had the opportunity to work with TPL, the Trust for Public Land, on acquiring Pritchard Park and also close property. And we had to sort of be fearless and say, well, we can do both of these things. It hadn't been done before, but because I was the president of the board at the time. And we did, and it worked. And the beautiful part of Pritchard, beyond just saving that gorgeous piece of property, and one of these days people will actually, people will actually be able to be on the point, which is my dream before I leave this earth, is that I got to meet the Japanese American community. Because what we did was, as we did our fundraising for Pritchard, we worked with the Japanese American community to say that whatever wasn't specifically for the Land Trust would go for the memorial, which just at that point had the one rock. And then after my time on the Land Trust board, it just evolved naturally to continue to work with the Japanese American community on that end of the park. And so that's when I started working first on the committee with a couple of people. You would know who they are, and then we realized that we really would have to form a new organization to actually do the fundraising and develop the park. So we did. So that was the formation of BIJAMA, which is such a mouthful. The Bainbridge Island Japanese American Exclusion Memorial Association. We talked about having BIJAMA parties in our jammies. But, and that, again, another wonderful experience, because each one of these, that spoke to all my sensibilities. And one of the things that had happened on Pritchard was that I got to work on, we had a public art piece. So again, I got to combine the nature and the art, and that was with Kristen Tollefson, of course, and co-location. So that I've long had this dream that we would have some public sculpture park element of Pritchard, and I don't know if it will ever happen, but it would be wonderful to have something there. And so then with BIJAMA, it was a matter of John Paul Jones had designed the wall, and it was beautiful, but there was the wall, and we needed to put something on it. So that was, again, back to art, talking to artists, figuring out how to make that a place that really spoke to people's heart, that conveyed the message of not letting it happen again, but also inspired people to see what a community could do if they cared, and if they saw not an enemy but a friend, if they saw not an enemy but a neighbor, if they saw, if they knew that there was an injustice, and if they could mitigate it to some degree simply by continuing to be a friend. And it was all of those connections that sort of led to Barn. Again, the art piece, the environmental piece, the community piece, all of those sort of came together around Barn as we started, and I probably came in again through interest in having a community commercial kitchen, but again, I've always loved art and tried to work art into virtually everything I've done. We started doing some research. So I've said a number of times that Barn was sort of born on a Park District bus on a trip to the Shack Arts Center, because what happened, a group of us with John Vandermeer, who was driving the bus, the Park District bus, because we were very happy to be working with the Park District at that point. And we spent the entire day driving up to Everett and back and touring the Shack Arts Center, and we came up with the name during that bus trip. And again, the creativity, the joy, the sense of you know, a vision of what could happen if we found, actually, instead of, there are just no old buildings to retrofit on Bainbridge, that we could actually find land, that we could build something that suited a number of different disciplines. And so it grew from that. We had some basic values, which was, and the main one was that Barn needed to be collaborative, not competitive. So we decided not, many people ask why we don't have a ceramic studio. We decided not to have a ceramic studio because the Park District had a dedicated building. And we felt that we wanted to be working with and filling in things that weren't being served on Bainbridge. And we wanted it to have these other elements of community service helping, because the woodworkers had started that and helping other nonprofits. So it just, I mean, again, there was, I can't use any word except joy when I talk about the level of creativity that went into everybody's working together to make it happen. People have asked me what I would like to do after Barn, and I guess my response is, first, I'm still having so much fun at Barn that I expect to continue working with and at Barn, whether or not I'm on the board. And my other response is usually something like, I very much live in the present, and I love what I do. And I find that that opens up whatever the next step is, so I don't often plan the next step. I just find that it grows organically from the things I do and the things I love and the people. And I think one of the things that I have, even though it's always hard to be spotlighted for these things, it has allowed me to sort of look back and enjoy again all over the path I've taken, and to think of all the wonderful people that I've met, and all the generosity and all the goodness that people express, and their willingness to share so much of what they have with this community. And it's just, it continues to touch my heart.